If you're not fired up about the news that hit the Oregon football team over the weekend, then frankly, I don't know that you should be able to walk around carrying your card that says you are a Ducks fan. There's a lot of recruiting news that's going positively for the Oregon football team as they look to build a strong foundation for the 2027, 28, 29, and 30 college football seasons. Because I'm telling you right now, as sad as that is to hear, it is coming around the corner. And the Oregon football team has two big updates from some players that I think, while they might not be big-time starters next year for the Oregon football team, they are going to be big-time players on a rotational basis for this team. And they could even potentially, depending on some injuries, end up becoming starters for this Oregon football team. Before we get into that news, though, we got to make sure that we're beating the Ohio State football report. They are now a rival for us in conference, and their host over there, the great Billy Beebe, he thinks that they can beat us in a sub-battle this week. I said, no way, Jose. Oregon football report is going to come away with a win in this sub-battle. How do you help us? All you do, you come in, you hit that subscribe button, and then here's the best part. You get covered on the Oregon football team throughout the year of 2026 and however else long you want to stay with us. Now, let's dive into that good news. I'm Will Ortner. This is the Oregon Football Report, and the Ducks got a gigantic commitment over the weekend. We're going to dive into who that player was and why he's going to be very beneficial to the Oregon football team. Will Mencl, is he going to be an Oregon Duck, or could he end up potentially going somewhere else? Sounds like he's probably going to be in Eugene. Anthony Tank Jones is having a great start to his Oregon football career, coming in during this spring season and performing pretty well. At least that's what his defensive line coach had to say. And Elijah Rushing, a player that a lot of Oregon football fans were excited for out of high school, hasn't really shown what he can be quite yet on the football field. We're going to get a positive update on him as well. Let's start with the four-star edge rusher, Rashad Streets, because he committed to the University of Oregon over the weekend, coming to us from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hayes Fawcett, of course, he was the one who ended up coming out with everything that was going on for this commitment. This is pretty typical. Hayes Fawcett is usually the guy on the streets who gets everything done. Now, landing a Rashad Streets commitment is a big deal for this Oregon football team. He's going to come in and be a big-time edge rusher for the Ducks at some point. Going to take potentially a couple of years before he ends up hitting the field for the Ducks. Could potentially take no time at all. That's just how good Streets is. Fantastic kid, really strong off the edge, quick, has a good bend. The type of player that you've seen really come in during the Dan Lanning era and have a lot of success for this Oregon football team. Now, this is a huge signing for the Ducks. Obviously, some recruiting news did not necessarily go the way of Oregon, losing an offensive tackle last week. The Oregon football team, they are not going to sit there and just whine, cry. They understand that this is the high school recruiting game. And I do believe that the Ducks are on the right path to have a lot of success moving forward. I love getting Streets in with this squad because, well, as good as the Ducks' defensive line is going to be this season, a lot of these guys, in fact, I would bet all of these guys are not going to be in Eugene next year. And I think it would be great for Streets to kind of come in and be a part of that next class to take over. Obviously, Tuioti and Mateo Uyungale have had a lot of success as edge rushers for the Oregon football team. I think that Streets can be the next version of this crew. Why did Rashad Streets commit to the University of Oregon? Well, let's just hear what he had to say himself. I really think it was the first impressions and the consistency they showed since they offered me. It was always the same message. They told me I was their guy, and they had some coaching staff changes, and even with that, the people in the building stayed the same. Co-DC got promoted, and the message was still the same. I love what Dan is building. If you love what Streets had to say on the Oregon football team, make sure that you hit that thumbs up button on today's video because I'm fired up. I cannot wait for him to come to Eugene. Next, let's talk about Will Mencl because the five-star quarterback, the number one quarterback in the land, well, he's been really eyeing the University of Oregon. And Adam Gorney, he ended up joining Josh Newberg on their podcast, and he had a little bit to say about where he believes Will Mencl will end up landing. And I think this is important. The quote that Newberg put in this post on X: Israel Abraham's commitment to Miami knocks Miami off the list for Will Mencl. They were a team that was heavily recruiting Mensel, which only favors Oregon as the leader. Now, the Ducks have been the leader for Mensel for quite some time because they were committing to him and recruiting him before Mensel became popular. This is one of those situations where you got in on maybe the ugly guy or the ugly girl before they had their big glow up, and then everyone's saying, well, how'd they end up landing that person? When you look at the Rivals top 5, Mensel is in that number 4 spot. Brewster, obviously, number 1 defensive lineman out of Texas. Meredith, top cornerback. Mark Matthews, top offensive tackle in Eastern Royals, the top receiver. Now, Mensel in that 4 spot, he was not someone who was always a top recruit. He was someone that early on nobody was talking about. Yet the University of Oregon, Dan Lanning, Drew Maringer, the rest of that staff, they saw something special with the kid out of Arizona. They said that's a quarterback that could end up being a big-time player for us. So landing him would be huge. The question is why is Mensel so high on the Ducks? It would be very easy for someone to become the popular kid in school, to become the hot chick or the hot guy, and all of a sudden they forget their friends over there at the Glee Club. They end up moving on. Now, I'm not saying that this is the most apt analogy because the Oregon Ducks are far from being the Glee Club in this situation. Unfortunately, that's probably Oregon State now in the Pac-12. Boom! Zinger. Love punching people while they're down. Anyways, when I look at Mensel, it is very clear that the Oregon football team has made it an important factor in this recruiting cycle to make sure that, one, their messaging is the same, just like it was for Streets, but more important, they made it very clear that they wanted him from the very beginning, and they do not intend on letting up. Here's what Will Mencl had to say on why it was such a big deal that he wanted to end up at the University of Oregon and why they are such a high recruiter right now on his list. My relationship with Coach Koa, the quarterback coach, started off when I wasn't the high recruit I am now. Being able to sit down with him for the first time, I was there helping push me over the edge mentally and be able to grow into the player I am now. So Mensel believes that Oregon and their recruitment towards him helped push him into being the 5-star player he is. And I love that because if they're helping push him to become the 5-star quarterback, the number 1 quarterback in the land, well, then that's probably a good sign that they will end up landing Mensel. Now, I'm going to ask you this because I've seen this type of commentary in the comment section and, frankly, in my DMs from time to time. Should the Ducks only target transfer portal quarterbacks? Obviously, in the Dan Lanning era, the only people who have started for the Ducks were all transfers in. Bo Nix was a transfer in, Dylan Gabriel, and now Dante Moore. The strong assumption is that the next starting quarterback will be Dylan Raiola, much to producer Searle's chagrin. If he is, that means that the Ducks in the Dan Lanning era have had 4 starting QBs. All of them have been transfer portal guys. I'm seeing some people say don't even recruit high school quarterbacks. Recruit guys that are at group of 5 schools after they have a big blow up and say, hey, we can get you to the NFL. Do you agree with this statement? Yes or no? Let me know your opinion down below in the comment section. Let's talk about Anthony Tank Jones because the 5-star edge is a big-time commitment for the Oregon football team, and he is someone that can live up to his billing, or if he can live up to his billing, is going to end up being a star player in college football. When we look at everything about Tank Jones, there have been a lot of people that have been hyping him up for years and years and years, talking about him as being the type of player that can come into this Dan Lanning mint defense and absolutely explode on the scene. This comes to us from Craig Hubert and Tom Luganbill, two big-time high school recruiting artists and reporters for ESPN. Jones is a premier pass rushing talent, and his prototypical 6'4", 240-pound frame is an ideal fit for the Ducks defense that loves to utilize scheme versatility. Edge rushers, Jones brings elite production with over 30 sacks during his final 3 years of high school. That's big time. You love getting that type of report from the experts when you have a high school recruit that's coming into spring ball. Now, obviously, spring ball really hasn't been going all that long, only a couple of practice so far under the belt. It's also important when you look at edge rushers, when you look at interior defensive linemen, linebackers to a degree, and for sure offensive linemen, you are not going to see the full extent of their capabilities until the pads come on. You can be as good as you want without pads, but you have to bang down low. That is a thing. It is a war in the trenches, and you have to be able to hit other people and be able to get hit. So there were a lot of whispers and hope after the first two practices that Jones could come in and continue to have the same type of productivity that he was having once the pads came on. And his defensive line coach, Tony Tuioti, had this to say. I think it's pretty effing exciting. I'm really excited about Tank. Tank had a really good practice today. He's another one very similar to Aiden Breland, really in our big game positions where he can play the edge, he can slide inside and play the 3 technique as well. This is awesome. We have seen the Oregon Ducks do this from Brandon Dorlus to Jordan Birch to even now Mateo Uiagalelei. What the Ducks like to do is have a lot of football players that have a lot of versatility when it comes to different positions. If you can play a 3 tech in certain situations and play an edge rusher in other situations, there are more opportunities for you to get out onto the field. So the fact that the Ducks already have a kid who is young, 18 years old, just coming out of high school, that's already turning heads and living up to the billing that he had previously, well, that makes me feel pretty fired up about him. Is he going to be a starter with this crew? No, probably not. But rotational guy, it does sound like he's on that path. And then in a year or so, maybe he'll end up being the starter. Very similar to what happened with Tuioti and what happened with Mateo Uiagalelei. Last, we're going to finish with Elijah Rushing because I think right now he's starting to turn heads in a way that a lot of Oregon football fans were hoping would have happened earlier, but it's okay that it took some time because I think too often we just expect everyone to be great right away, and I also think that the lack of success for guys like Ty Thompson or Jurian Dickey have kind of scared some Oregon football fans when it comes to 5 stars that don't pan out right away or do not necessarily start as hot as a lot of Oregon football fans were hoping for. Now, Rushing is the type of player that there was hope he would instantly step onto the scene and be a complete game changer. That hasn't happened so far, but I do think it's important to note that it's clear he's starting to have a really good spring ball. Obviously, that picture there taken from a previous practice, a different day. Here's what Tony Tuioti had to say on Elijah Rushing. We had a really good talk with Elijah in the offseason. He's put on more weight. He's 285 now. So he's tall, he's long, and he's continuing to get bigger and stronger, so he's able to anchor in the run game a lot better. When he first came in here, he was like 250, so trying to anchor in the run game and get as much knocked back, he wasn't that strong enough to do that. Now he's getting into his body, which is something that happens with a lot of defensive linemen when they come in. You've got to develop to be able to play that position effectively. Now, I love this for the Oregon football team because it means that you have a guy like Elijah Rushing who came in as a 5-star kid and he didn't listen to the negative noises. He didn't listen to the negative voices. He said, I'm going to take the criticisms that I'm getting or the critiques or the coaching, whatever you want to phrase it, from Tuioti and from Lanning, and I'm going to make myself into the best possible player that I possibly can be. I think too often now we see a lot of high school recruits, college players that say, I was a 5-star or I was a 4-star. I dominated where I was at. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm effing awesome. And then they go and transfer somewhere else because the coach hates them or doesn't want what's best for them, is negative against them. I think what you look at here is, one, it's a great culture sign that Rushing didn't just leave. He listened to the coaching and he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to make the changes because I guarantee he doesn't make those changes without people having his back, without guys on the team saying, hey, man, we need you to stay. You're going to be awesome one day. But it also shows the type of kid that Rushing is and the type of person that he is because he's able to look through all the BS, hear what the coaches are saying, not necessarily how they're saying it, and take it and run with it, gain it in stride. Is Rushing going to start this season? No, probably not. But if there's an injury, he could easily be someone that steps into that role. But when you run the Mint defense, like the Oregon Ducks do, you have to have players. There's lots of rotation. There's constant movement with this team. And so for a guy like Rushing, he's probably going to get a lot of run this year, or at least a lot more than he got last year. And I don't see why he couldn't step up and not just be a good player for this team, but being someone who's kind of viewed as, hey, he's that 5th D lineman, that next guy up. And I love that. And I love that for him because he's definitely earned it. If you love that, hit that thumbs up button on today's video, not just because you love the Oregon football team, but also because you love everything that we've got going on here at the channel. If you made it to the end of today's video and you hate the Ohio State Buckeyes, hit that sub button. We've got content like this every single day out here on the channel. You don't want to miss out on any of it. Thank you guys so much for viewing today's video, and Go Ducks!